Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Travis Shingledecker, and I'm a director at Aperio Philanthropy, a co-host of today's webinar alongside NYU School of Professional Studies. Aperio is a fundraising consulting firm that partners with nonprofits to grow their revenue sustainably and dynamically. We have a vision for a world in which everyone can thrive and believe nonprofits are essential to achieving that vision. Day to day, we work alongside community leaders and fundraisers to develop simple, faster, and smarter ways to generate revenue for nonprofit missions. Our client services provide strategic advisory, hands-on support, and embedded fundraisers to organizations nationwide. For the past few years, we have been facilitating conversations with NYU about the role of philanthropy in driving change and solving the complex challenges that our communities face. Today's webinar is part of our series on building fundraising resiliency and will focus specifically on diversifying revenue. It is my pleasure to now introduce our co-host, Michelle D'Amico.
Thank you, Travis. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle D'Amico, and I'm the Director of Continuing Education and Public Programs at the NYU SPS Center for Global Affairs, or CGA. Since its founding, our goal at the CGA has been to prepare global citizens to make a positive impact in the world. We do this through a variety of activities, including our two graduate programs, one in global affairs and another MS in global security, conflict, and cybercrime. We also offer a wide variety of skills and knowledge-based continuing education courses and offer public events such as this that expand upon the topics we cover in our classrooms. We are very proud to be home to the George H. Heyman Jr. Program for Fundraising and Philanthropy. Through our open enrollment courses, on-site intensives, and certificate in fundraising, we offer professionally oriented educational options for those looking to enter or grow within the fundraising field. Courses are taught by practitioner faculty who bring their vast experience, expertise, and networks to the classroom. We'll send out additional information about our programs following today's conversation, so please feel free to reach out with any questions. Now I'm delighted to introduce today's moderator. Cassie Cox is Senior Director of Institutional Partnerships at Accion International. Cassie is a transformational global social sector leader whose extensive experience includes formative years in both the US Army and private sector, but she found her true calling when she took her first position at the International Rescue Committee in 2009. There, she supported newly arrived refugees in finding their first job in New York City. Since then, Cassie has gone on to support strategic program delivery and design in the US, the UK, Kenya, Liberia, South Sudan, Somalia, Singapore, India, and elsewhere around the world. And we are very proud to share that she's also an esteemed alumnus of our MS in Global Affairs program. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Casey for today's introduction.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Travis and Aperio, for hosting the event. I think this is a critical conversation for all of us to be thinking about. As we know, we're in what feels like a very uncertain time in the world today. And as Aperio spoke about, nonprofits are more critical than ever. But uncertainty also affects nonprofits, right? It complicates everything from strategic planning to service delivery. For fundraisers, the demands are high. Not only do we have to raise funds, but we have to deliver on that growth for tomorrow. Revenue diversification is top of mind for nonprofit leaders everywhere. I don't know about you, but it's always in my goals. It's natural for organizations to gravitate to a small number of revenue sources, such as events, grants, or even a small number of large donors. But as many organizations have experienced recently, it's also risky. This panel will explore how diversification can create resiliency. How do we build new revenue streams, particularly on a base of robust events? And how do you avoid spreading your team too thin with all of these competing priorities? Now it is my pleasure to introduce the distinguished panel. Abby Ferris-Rogers. Welcome, the Chief Development Officer at the YMCA of the USA. Abby is directly responsible for leading YUSA's philanthropic and strategic partnership development activities, including corporate, foundation, and government funding, and is responsible for driving efforts to enhance the fundraising capacity of YMCAs at large. Courtney Nicolato is a mission-driven executive leader and systems change agent with 2 decades of experience in nonprofit management and entrepreneurship. Courtney is president and CEO of United Way of Rhode Island, a statewide nonprofit with more than 80 employees and an operating budget of $28 million. And last, but certainly not least, we have Tunde Wackman, Chief Development Officer at World Central Kitchen. Tunde leads fundraising efforts to advance the organization's mission and strategic goals, with over 2 decades of experience in driving strategy and business development across diverse industries, including nonprofits and media organizations. Tunde has built transformational partnerships with Fortune 500 brands across the globe. Welcome to all of you. Let's begin. To set the stage, I think what we'd love to hear from each of you is, how do you think about the idea of revenue diversification in your current roles?
I can start. Maybe I'll just give a 30,000-foot overview of World Central Kitchen, if that's helpful, just to put it in context. So at WCK, we exist to fill gaps in food access. We respond to natural disasters, community emergencies, and humanitarian crises around the world. We're a team of food first responders, mobilizing with that urgency of now, within 24 to 72 hours after a crisis occurs. And our relief model then provides nutritious meals directly to people in need, while also supporting local economies during a crisis. We source our ingredients locally, hire locally, and also partner with local suppliers, ensuring that our meals are always culturally appropriate. And we see that especially in times of crisis, food not only provides nourishment, but also that hope and comfort and dignity. So just by nature of our organization, we are super fast-paced, where innovative thinking is valued. And therefore, in my position, I take a very entrepreneurial approach to revenue diversification. I personally really enjoy that creativity and innovation that comes with identifying new revenue opportunities. And I have that liberty and that space in my role here at WCK to take those calculated risks as I explore new avenues for funding, whether that's through corporate partnerships or individual donors or innovative fundraising campaigns to ensure that sustainability and support for our mission.
Great, thank you for sharing today. Courtney.
Great. And I'm so excited to be here and thrilled for the conversation. I kind of come into this conversation with a couple of lenses. As a funder, the United Way of Rhode Island is one of the 2 largest funders here in the state of Rhode Island, where we put nearly $10 million each year into the Rhode Island nonprofit community. We lean in heavily into trust-based philanthropy as well. So we fund general operating costs. But also we provide a series of programs and services to Rhode Islanders, programs like our 2-on-1 call center, which talks to over 1 in 5 Rhode Islanders, or 1 in 4.5 Rhode Islanders every year. And so it gives us a really interesting view into what the needs of our state is. But also, you can imagine, we're a funder and we're developing funds, right? And we're cultivating relationships and building a donor base. We have a donor base of about 15,000 Rhode Islanders who contribute annually to our organization. But what's really interesting is that they give to the United Way through our Community Impact Fund, and through the United Way to organizations that are most meaningful to them anywhere here in the United States. And so, when I think about fund development, it's a little crazy in that there's a number of facets that we have to think about on a routine basis. But to Tunde's point, the idea of being entrepreneurial, I think, has to be in every fund developers and fundraisers' minds at all times. I think COVID did nothing but prove the need for us to do that, in that, especially in Rhode Island, the needs continue to escalate, the government funds continue to de-escalate. And that is, I know, a story that I hear from so many people. I also think that how folks want to give looks very different than, how it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The use of technology, our young donors, and how they really want to be connected into the work. And so we are constantly evolving in fund development. I think once you feel like you have your stable ground, you got to move again. And so it needs to be consistently entrepreneurial. I think also, and I have the distinct pleasure of teaching fundraising at another great university, not NYU, but another great university. And in the conversations that we have, we talk about this necessity. We are small businesses. Nonprofits are mission-driven businesses. And it's critically important for us to consistently look at a diversification of our revenue. And in some cases, that may include individuals, grants, foundations, all the things that I think are traditional, but also is there sellable assets? Is there opportunities to build capital? Is there opportunities to use space to generate revenue? And so that consistent idea of social entrepreneurship and social innovation needs to be interwoven into absolutely everything that we do. And so it makes it fun, right? This is why we like to do what we do. And also infuriating and frustrating, but I think the mission is the central point of our focus each and every day. And I think that's why we all are here and excited to talk about what we need to do to continue that momentum.
Great. Abby, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, great. Well, and again, like Courtney, a little bit of a different take we are a national organization to our 770 YMCAs across the country. So we have a little bit of a different space too. We do our own fundraising at YUSA. We are a funder to our local YMCAs, but we're also a training partner, a consultant to help them in their best practices on how they are thinking about their fundraising, how they're thinking about the diversification at the local level. So we have that part of it too, how we're helping them think through what that is, and that thought partner with them in the diversification in their local markets, which is different across the country, whether that's an urban market, a rural market, a suburban market. And so, what that looks like and how we're helping them with their best practices in different ways. And so as we really understand the differences across the country and in different places, how we are helping regionally, how we are helping in the broad perspective across the country, understand all of the different aspects of how we can do that. And so we are doing our own diversification at the national level, whether that's national partnerships, whether that is in national fundraising that we are able to bring to the table, and then work with our opportunities that we have to grow our resources, but then also how do we help them pass that back out and re-granting, just like the United Way does to their partners to do that. But then also working with them in their own states, whether that's a state alliance of YMCAs, to help them think about how do they do that in a regional basis as well. And so that is really some of the diversification that we've been working on, is not only in the different types of fundraising and the different avenues to fundraise, but how do they think differently about how do they do that fundraising together and come together in partnership, whether that is partnerships of YMCAs or partnerships of nonprofits, and thinking about that, because I think that is really a lot of what we're finding is that funders want that collaboration of funders to do the work together and fund it in one project versus kind of all the one-offs that we see in a lot of different ways. So there's just a lot of different types of diversification in the market too, not just in different types of funding, but how we are asking for that funding.
I think Aperio's done a great job of bringing together people who have such a breadth of experience. And so I think what I'd love to hear now from each of you is sort of why it matters more. And Courtney, how do you know when it's time to diversify? What do you look at? How do you evaluate opportunities? How do you formulate that plan?
Well, I mean, first off, data is so important to this conversation and is top of mind consistently. Is what is the data telling us, right? So looking at key figures like total number of donors, total grant dollars, looking at, the average gifts, looking at all of these things that really make up, each bucket of your funding models, right? Government grants is a great example too. I think lots of organizations saw this big uptick, and then all of a sudden it either went completely downward or stabilized in a way. And so we are consistently looking at those streams. We're looking at what are the areas where we're seeing either, some type of plateauing or some type of decline. Where we need to put the most resources, or maybe we need to pivot resources to be accommodating. And so, data has to be the infrastructure to which you're really looking at it. But also it's, things like storytelling. Is the storytelling you're doing really moving the needle in the same way that it did a year ago or 2 years ago? Is there a better way or more need for us to invest in a different type of technology that can then help drive conversation and relationship in a different way? And so, I look at the data, I look at the tools and the resources, and I look at the people. Do we have the right people in place? Do they have the right trainings and supports in the right place to meet their goals and objectives that are necessary. And so I mentioned earlier before we started, Aperio's physically here today talking and meeting with my fundraising staff as we are, focused on our 100th anniversary, which is happening 2 years from now, and really ramping up our Next Century campaign. And so it's a constant as we've been talking about evolution, but also we really need to be strategic in how we use our resources, where we use our resources, understanding not only what trends are looking like, but our own individual experiences that we're having with the relationships. The other thing I'll just mention is, fundraising is all about relationships, and it's also about how we build affinity. How do we build, long-term a donor journey, a relationship over time? And that has changed dramatically too. How people want to be engaged, how they want to learn about the efforts and the work that are happening at your organization is changing and morphing. And so we are under this big scope right now. We're looking and making a lot of tweaks in how we connect with donors, how we think about our relationships, and then how do we diversify our overall revenue stream. So it's a pretty exciting and a bit daunting process, but something as lead fundraisers and executives is top of mind every day.
All right, it looks like Cassie may be having some technical issues here. So does anybody else want to jump in on that question for now?
Yeah, I think when you look at that and, what comes from that, when you look at how you formulate that plan and you look at that data, then, you're able to grow what you have. And, when you grow your revenues and you grow your opportunity to do that, the resiliency that you have, the ability to be able to take more chances. If you only do events and events go away, like we saw during COVID, you don't have anything else to fall back on, right? You have to start from zero and you have to grow it from nothing. And so when you are able to diversify your revenue streams and you have multiple threads to pull on in order to do different things, if events go away all of a sudden, and maybe you have a direct mail or you have a major gift program, there are other places for you to lean on. And so the ability to be resilient in different types of markets, whether it is a financial market that may be coming up or down, whether it is a government grants that may go up or down based on different administrations that are coming in, whether it is, changing generations who give differently. If you are diversified, your capacity to do different types of fundraising, to lean more heavily in one direction or another, creates the resiliency to move through different cycles in donor giving. And I think that's part of the ability to be able to respond in a moment when we don't know what might be happening in different things. Sometimes those cycles come over a course of time and you can see them coming. And sometimes they happen overnight, like in COVID. And if you are not able to prepare for a cycle that is coming because you're seeing it coming, you need to have different things to lean on in different spaces. In COVID, those organizations that had major donor relationships that were about people who understood your organizations, who were close to you, who believed in the work that you did and wanted to come close to you, those, we call them, that were in the campfire with you, that were sitting by the fire with you, that were in the tent with you. Those were the ones that got you through that period of time. If they were buying a ticket to an event and the event didn't happen, maybe they were with you, maybe they weren't with you. And maybe they've come back now, maybe your events come back now, but that ability to have different types of revenue streams was really that opportunity to kind of live through that period of time until other streams came back. And so I think the resiliency to pull on different types of revenue, just like any business, somebody said, Courtney, maybe you said, like, this is a business. And in any business, they're looking to have different types of revenue stream. You don't want to be dependent upon one thing. And I think nonprofits have to be the same way. We have to be building different capacities. We have to be building different opportunities for us to have revenue streams that we can lean on during different periods of time when one is coming up or down during different areas.
Yeah, and then maybe I can just chime in on beyond the financial benefits, right? Why does diversification matter on that front? And of course, revenue diversification, everything that you have said, I agree with. It fosters that resiliency by providing a buffer during economic downturns or changes in funding landscapes and donor priorities, all those lovely things. But I think diversification also matters beyond the finances because a diverse pool of donors bring varied perspectives and expertise, really enriching organizational relevance and impact by fostering innovation and adaptability. We certainly see that from our robust grassroots base. They are not shy about emailing my team and myself about their ideas of how World Central Kitchen could perhaps even respond even more around the globe. And then they have creative ideas of how they can pitch in and how they could contribute to our impact even further. So we view them as almost thought partners, and really they're pushing us to do more and to do better every day. And it's just a lovely way of also feeling connected. So I think diversification matters beyond the financial benefits that are so crucial, of course.
And Tunde brought up a great point. I just want to mention from a funder perspective, if we see that you do not have a diversification of your revenue, it is a red flag. We do not want our grant to be the thing keeping the lights on. We need to see that there's been, real thoughtfulness about planning for the future. And I think diversification of revenue is doing that. You're planning for the unexpected and maybe the expected. And so, funders do take a very deep look at how you diversify your revenue streams, and you may or may not get funding as a result of it. So it's extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think I've answered those questions several times to donors about that, so I think it's super valid. Just wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about diversifying relationships. Once we kind of understand that diversification is the next step we need to take, it's kind of tempting to think that diversification means we have to launch a new or innovative, fundraising channel. But oftentimes we have to start with kind of the more foundational question: how do we broaden the engagement of people already in our community? That could look like engaging event attendees year-round through direct response or relationship building. It can also look like starting a major gifts program to create personalized relationships with people who may be interested in a deeper investment in the mission. Courtney, I'd love to hear from you. What strategies have you used to take that first step to engage more donors in more ways? And what recommendations would you have for organizations just starting out thinking about this?
And Roberto asked a great question. Thank you for that in the Q&A around, survey fatigue. And I think that's a real thing. And I really appreciate the question because I'm personally not a fan of surveys because I don't think that they are personalized enough to really hearing the good, the bad, the ugly, and all of the things. I think you get a very high level view, but maybe really not the details you need as you're thinking through the diversification of your revenue and the donor relationships. And so, one of the things that we're a big fan of here at the United Way is being really thoughtful about proactively having conversations prior to us developing anything or prior to us thinking about a concept or idea. And the reason why we do that is twofold. One is we want a sense of ownership that's felt across the community. And I think that's really important to see anything to success is doing that proactively. But two, we want donors to get interested and be a part of the development of something. And so that really helps, or an enhancing of something you already have, right? Because oftentimes I think we talk about, and we do not want to create for the sake of creating. No one wants to create for the sake of creating. They want to, you want to create for the sake of impact. You want to create for the sake of strategy. You want to create for the sake of your mission, your vision, and the values of your organization. And so having those conversations proactively with grant makers, with donors, with government officials and state agencies really gives folks that, hey, they're thinking about this, they're being proactive about this, and at the same time, they're hearing us. They want us to be part of the conversation. And so we do that in a myriad of different ways throughout. That's really allowed us to build a great diversity of revenue. And some of the things that at first, when we thought about the idea, we weren't sure exactly what it was going to look like. And I think we've been seeing that. I think surveys do, to Roberto's point, surveys do have a place, but I think we have to be really thoughtful and intentional about when you ask and how you ask, because sending an annual survey via email and getting 2% back is not telling you the story that you're looking for. And so I would highly encourage you to partner with a local university or someone who has really good insights around qualitative and quantitative analysis to help you frame the types of questions you ask. But we like to have donor salons. We like to have like really cool, small group gatherings where we're bringing a group folks together to have meaningful conversations that doesn't feel that feels more personal and less of like, hey, we're going out to the masses to ask questions. I think you also need to understand your donor group and your partners and how they want to be heard and how they want to contribute. We have some donors that literally we're going to write the check. We want you to keep doing, but please just do what you need to do, right? And they're not the ones we invite to a small group gathering, right? And so making sure that you're really catering to what your partners and your investors want is a critical part of diversifying that revenue stream too.
Yeah, I would just add to that being,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I was just going to say, like, if you're going to ask the question, be ready to respond to the answer do you get to, right? Like, don't ask the question if you don't want to like be ready to do something about what they tell you. That's the worst thing that you could do. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point and kind of leads me into the question I was going to ask to hear from you about, which is how do you think about diversifying the engagement of the community that supports the YMCA? There's obviously a very robust community of members nationwide. So, what can other organizations learn from that model?
You know what? We have the benefit of having thousands of people who walk through our doors every single day, and we love that. And so, we get the opportunity to engage with, and not all of them are donors. We would love for more of them to be donors every single day. We work on that all the time. And, that's part of what the challenge, the really great challenge we have is how do we make all of those members become donors? But we do get the chance every day to make, to tell them the story, to have the opportunity to have things on our walls, on our social media, there's our staff, so how are we training our staff? How are we doing really great storytelling for those members that are coming through our buildings every single day to tell the story about who and what we are? And are we connecting the dots, not just to what our treadmills are and what of our Group X class are, but like, how is that making the impact that we want? And how are we connecting community in the way we want and strengthening the foundations of community? But beyond that, beyond the members that we have coming into our walls, we know that there's so much more of the community that we're impacting every single day. So what does that look like to go out? And in the same way, the United Way is creating those community conversations outside of our buildings with our donors, with the communities that we are serving, and understanding both ends of that, both understanding what our donors want from us and how we can respond to what they are looking for from us, but also what is the community that we're serving and how do they want us and what do they need from us that we are not assuming that we know, but that we are asking and that we are responding to how they would like us to partner with them and to come along beside them and walk with them on the work that we can do and how we might be able to just engage with them in a way that is going to help engage us and, enrich us in our lives that we're doing, but also then bring along in some way that we might be able to help serve them in some way. And so we're excited about that. And I think when we do that work, right, when we are just asking questions, when we are stopping long enough to not make assumptions, but we are really, truly listening to both ends and being willing to hear the answers and being willing to put our own assumptions aside and being ready to kind of say, okay, well, then I'm going to take and put aside what I think we should be doing and the programs we think we should be doing and how we think we should be doing and responding to what it is that our donors are telling us, what it is that our members are telling us, and then really engaging in that work in an authentic way with those. I think on both ends of that, I think that's when we truly are able to do really great work and engage more and have people who want to do that work with us in a way that is really something that is a beautiful partnership on all ends, and we can bring people together in a way that is deep and long-term. And I think, you know, we talk about that. I love it. Personally, my passion is around personal relationships in that kind of way, but I think it can be done when you're doing it through direct response in a really authentic way. It can be done when you're doing it in other ways too. And we're in a generation where, you know, my son only talks by text and Instagram and Snapchat, right? Like he's 17, and to him that is authentic and it's real and it's different, right? And so I think we have to put our own assumptions aside about that and say that we can do that same work across the spectrum and in lots of diversified ways, and understand that different generations are doing that differently. And so how do we do that work in a way that is just in meeting everyone where they are and really understanding that that is how the next generation is going to be doing it. And so I think there's lots for all of us to learn in all of the generations that are there. And I need to make sure that I continue to be open-minded about all the things, even when I have my own ideas about the best practices for fundraising. So, you know, I'm learning all the time.
I love that. I love how community and kind of being really open-minded about what is the right way to reach people where they are. I think that's really important. And I think, Tunde, I'm sure you'd agree that one of World Central Kitchen's greatest strengths is its community of those grassroots supporters. So I'd love to hear from you, Tunde, about how do you work to keep those supporters engaged in a way that creates long-term sustainability for the organization?
100%. I would agree with that statement every single day and twice on Sunday. It is definitely grassroots communities are our superpower. We, at any given year, about 60 to 70% of our donations come from individuals, and a large portion of that is from that grassroots community. So they're incredible, and their affinity and commitment to our mission is a huge source of strength for us. And Abby, I had a little giggle when you mentioned of, you know, meeting donors where they are at. We are definitely doing that with our grassroots community. I mean, we have every single platform that you can think of. We even have a Discord group. It's small, but it's growing. I mean, every single avenue that we can think of, we're meeting them where they are at. And really, as we embrace this community, we're constantly thinking of how we connect with them authentically, meet them where they are at. How do we build our donor journeys? While also prioritizing, of course, transparency and impact reporting in there too, right? To build that trust and further inspire and deepen their continued support. A lot of times we see where other generous donors will have fundraisers, dedicate their birthdays, or have a knit-a-thon. I mean, we have all kinds of different community affinity groups that plug in and they're like, we're fundraising for World Central Kitchen. We're like, cool, this is so awesome. We have never heard of this group. You are going to run at night and fundraise for us? Okay, yay, we're so grateful. But yes, but then that community is transient that they bring with them. So how do we then think about engaging not only the person who generously hosted that fundraiser for us, but then get that information and that data. I so appreciate, Courtney, your comment about data is king. It's definitely on my mind constantly, and my team's mind too, of how do we then leverage and bring them into our community, and how do we keep stewarding them toward that, building that long-term sustainability and growth. So on our end, we invest in a community fundraising team who actively meet our grassroots donors where they are at. And they engage them through ongoing communications. Again, every which platform possible that they choose. Sometimes our donors, like I said, they're not shy. They'll tell us, like, we noticed you don't have this platform. And then we'll say, okay, we'll figure that out. And we'll make that platform now live. And it was pretty quickly at World Central Kitchen. And, you know, we engage them in stewardship opportunities as well. I firmly believe that by fostering that sense of belonging and ownership, we can then cultivate this loyal community invested in our mission even further. I'll give you an example. For example, if someone supported our work in Ukraine, they not only received those detailed impact reports and updates on our work, but also get invited to opportunities where they hear directly from members of our relief team and local Ukrainian team leads, for example. So it's just like deepening those ties. So My dog, I think in the background, if you can hear her, she also agrees. And she's very vocal about this.
Well, if you let her know to turn my electricity back on, that would be absolutely fabulous.
I'll make that happen. Penny,
Maybe she can shout to somebody. I think it's great because you kind of walked us right to our next topic, which is, once we think about, is it time to diversify? And then we think about those relationships. Then we have to think about those new audiences. And so I think it would be really great to hear, you kind of alluded to this already, Tunde, but from Abby and Tunde, just what new audiences are you working to reach right now? What are you learning about revenue diversification, like in that process?
I'll go. One of the things that we are looking at right now is the impact investing that we're hearing a lot right now. We obviously have a lot of buildings. We have 2,600 facilities across the country. And there's a lot of capital that we need to be able to maintain, and there's plenty of communities that we'd love to build new Ys in. And so as we continue to look at that, just in the investment from that, as we think about the capital we need for that, what would it look like for us to really partner with some of the impact investing that we see is becoming a growing thing in the community? And so that's one of the things from a diversified space that we're starting to really kind of think more broadly about what that might look like. And the other one for us is there's a lot of our Ys that did not, we have some Ys that were very big into government funding and did a lot of government funding prior to the pandemic, but a lot of our smaller Ys that did not. And the pandemic changed that. And so, but as the government money, we're trying to see if we can stabilize that for some of our Ys and create long-term capacity for them and government funding. But there's a lot of capacity building that we have to build in some of our smaller organizations to be able to make that a long-term. Some of that pandemic money was very easy federal money, and the long-term stuff is not quite so easy. So there's two kind of pieces that we're tracking there.
Great, thanks, Abby. Tunde, back to you. What are the new audiences that you're working to reach right now, and what are you learning about diversification through that?
Gosh, I mean, WCK is increasingly responding to crises outside of the US, including long-term activations, such as the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East right now. And while our US donors are incredibly generous and so have such a great affinity with our organization, we know that we have to expand our donor base outside of the US in order to be able to scale our work and capacity for these international responses. So international audiences in key markets where we have had these recurring activations are a key focus for us right now and going forward. I'll give you an example. We are engaging with Muslim communities, for example, as our work in Gaza authentically speaks to our commitment to provide food aid in the Middle East, particularly in Gaza. We are gearing up to launch our very first Ramadan campaign tomorrow. So we're learning the importance of adapting our messaging, that storytelling, and that those engagement strategies to resonate with diverse audiences. And thereby we're enriching our revenue diversification efforts, but also learning new ways to really reach out and speak authentically to our communities and reach new ones as well.
I love that. Courtney, United Way Rhode Island is a great case study in revenue strategy evolution. In an ever-changing philanthropic landscape, how do you adapt, evolve, and remain responsive to the needs of that community that you serve?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, just for some background around United Way really primarily started as what's called community chest. And so it was working with our corporate partners, particularly to create workplace campaigns, to generate employee engagement, volunteerism, employee giving. And that is still a part of our work. But we have seen that the giving trends have really changed in, one, how corporations want to be involved and engaged with their employees. Workplace giving campaigns have gone down nationally pretty significantly, or they've really looked at it more transactionally and worked with technology platforms rather than working with their community United Ways. Additionally, what we've found is that just the level of the type of relationship that folks want, and our corporate partners have shifted. Donors want to work directly with us now rather than going through their corporations. We're finding our younger donors particularly do not want to utilize I don't know why it's pre-tax. There's a lot of value, but they don't want to give through their workplace. Some have said, Big Brother, they don't want their employer knowing where they're giving. There's lots of reasons as to why folks, have shifted that. So United Way's, and I'm very grateful to sit on the Global Advisory Council at United Way Worldwide. We've taken a really big look at that. And, and so many United Ways, unfortunately, aren't moving fast enough to diversify their revenue streams and look at and understanding that the workplace campaigns and how our workplaces want to work with us is very different than it was. There's more of a mutual value that needs to be there rather than, hey, just do a workplace campaign every year. And so organizations in United Ways like ours have really totally remodeled how we work with our corporate partners. One example of that is we do a program called the Equity Challenge. We work with diversity, equity, inclusion teams at our corporate partners to deploy a 3-week educational programming around equity and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging specifically, not only in their organization, but through the communities that they serve. And so that is something that they may want to create on their own, but they have a trusted partner in the United Way to be able to deploy that and continue to show the value. We run the Volunteer Center of Rhode Island here, and we curate and implement volunteer engagement experiences for corporations throughout the state as well. So there's a different way on how we engage above and beyond the workplace that has really allowed us to stabilize those relationships, but not only stabilize them, but grow them over time. And over the last few years, we've actually started to see a really significant shift in donors. Our number of our average gift has expanded pretty significantly over the last few years as well. But it's also required us as an organization to have really 2 separate streams: a donor relations major gift plan giving focus and our corporate relations, obviously working very closely together. But the traditional United Way didn't have both streams at that, at the level that we do today. So we've really taken a very big look inward as to what the data was telling us, what we were hearing directly from our corporate partners, what we were hearing directly from our donors. We're very fortunate to have been working and continue to work with Imperial Philanthropy as we're redesigning our systems internally to make sure that we're responding to the needs of our donor base today, but also the future demands that we know our donors, our partners, our grant makers, et cetera, it will be expecting from us at United Way. I think the last thing I'll just mention on this is it's important to know, and we say this all the time at United Way of Rhode Island, is we raise money for the entire community, not just us. So, we are doing hundreds of thousands of donor designations every year. And so, we are consistently looking at ways that we can continue to amplify not only the work of United Way, but of the incredible nonprofit community we have here in the state.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think it's very interesting, this sort of overlap of old and new, right? Like corporate partners have always been there, but now what it looks like is very different. And it's just the importance of, kind of being able to move with the current and meet people where they are, as you guys have all said. So we are now at that moment where we are going to be jumping over to questions. So I've got a few questions lined up here. I'm going to take a look at the first one. I'll welcome the panelists to just jump in, whoever feels like they're ready. This has been a great conversation. So just thank you to everybody. The first question we have here is, can you talk about alternative types of revenue stream, like cryptocurrency, investing, stock markets, bequest, et cetera? Do any of your organizations pull from these types of revenue streams? Does anybody want to take that one?
Yeah, I would say we do all of those. We treat cryptocurrency right now like stocks, so we would sell it as soon as we get it, and versus keeping it in any kind of a way. But we take stock transfers, we take 401k transfers. We do. We have a very large endowment that we have at the Y that we have. We take bequests, we take so yeah, we do all of those pieces and parts of that in different ways, and I think it's a great option for our donors to be able to donate to us in any way that they feel like is good for them to be able to do that.
Same. World Central Kitchen, we will meet where the donors are. We will really meet them at their giving capacity, but also their form of giving. I don't think that we take cryptocurrency, but everything from stocks to donor advised funds to bequests, all of those avenues are fair game for us as well.
Yeah, and at the United Way, we do have a donor advised fund it's called charitable checking account called My Fund. And so IRA designations, you name it. One thing just to know, we actually, we were bestowed a bequest about more than 70 years ago, almost 100 years ago now, from the founder of Textron, Royal Little, who actually funds, it still to this day funds our administrative and fundraising costs, which is like an incredible gift. You can imagine like the legacy that was left. One part of that legacy was clay mines in Georgia. Now, and I will share, I knew nothing about clay, kaolin clay. Prior to joining the United Way in 2018, I learned a lot about kaolin clay, kaopectate, shine on the folder, is all kaolin clay. So very grateful for kaolin clay, but I will say you have to manage it, and it takes work, and you have to work with the vendor who is curating the clay and all of the various things. So be mindful what you accept. Have a gift acceptance policy. It's critically important. Make sure that your board understands when a gift, even a potential gift would come in, what that would mean from a management over time. Luckily, we have a great partner who does our work. We have a great contract. And so there's a number of things that have been put into place prior to my arrival that I'm very grateful for. But there's been other things that have come, a horse, a ranch in Texas. By the way, I live in Rhode Island, right? So like, there's just lots of things that you need to kind of proactively think about, and do you accept it or not? And so, I think constantly evaluating that, looking at your gift acceptance policy, having conversations, learning from great philanthropic partners that have been there and done that, is a critical part of that.
Yeah, thank you all. I think the next question is somewhat related, because I think the question is about just as a new organization, as you have to take on funds. I think to the point that you just raised about, having a gift policy, if you're a new organization, how do you think about being able to justify the work and justify the mission if you don't have a diversity of donors, or and maybe even a gift policy in that case?
And I can just mention, I have been there, and I know a number of us have been there, where you're either a startup, nonprofit, or social enterprise. I've run startup for-profit companies as well, and it's really the same thing. It's constantly looking at how you can diversify. I think I'm always with the mindset, maybe too much, but I'm always with the mindset that anyone could walk away at any time. Any donor, any funder, any government grant. And so not assuming that they are always going to be there is a mindset that I think is critically important to development professionals. And so that really requires you to be curious. It requires you to be creative as you think about options. Because I think, COVID, we have a number of different organizations who have come to us and said, hey, when government dollars go away, we may have to close our doors. And, and so we've spent a lot of time with organizations saying, well, let's dig into it. Let's understand what you have and where. And the problem was, at the end of the day, there wasn't plans on how do I diversify my revenue streams. And so, you do have to invest as things are happening, and it's hard, especially for small organizations who are crushing it every day, doing incredibly important things for the community, to take a step back and say, what if, or what's next, or how do I sustain? But as leaders, it's a must. It's an absolute must.
I think the plan is the most important part of that, right? Like you don't have to have it done, but you have to be able to tell a donor who's currently funding you that you are thinking about the future and that you are not that you're just like, no, but you're funding me. Like, I'm good, right? Like, you got to be able to say, like, I understand that I'm not diversified today, but I have a plan to be diversified and I'm moving in that direction. And I think they understand that you're a startup. They understand that you're not there yet. They're not like, they're with you. They're in it with you right now. But you have to be able to say that you know where you're going and that you are focused in that direction. And I think if you can clarify that you are focused in the right direction and that you know that you're moving in there, that you have steps and that there's an intentionality about that, they will walk with you in that. It's when you don't have any plans and you're not even thinking about that and you are just like, what? I have to be what? That's where I think you're going to end up with the problem. And they're going to be like, I'm not sure you've got it to like take it to the next step and the next level. And that's where you'll hit the wall potentially.
That's a great point. Tunde, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh gosh, I think you guys have covered it. I don't have anything substantive to add to those great points. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. The next question we have is from John at Doctors Without Borders. First, he says, great panel, so thank you. But he was also asking about, typically you engage donors. There's like a very specific moment in time where you engage a donor. How do you keep that momentum going to keep that donor attracted and interested in following and giving?
I can take this one just because we are so similar in our work, right? I think I look to MSF and I am just so incredibly awed and just respect their mission so much. So thank you for the question. I think this is the holy grail in our work, right? How do you keep after a crisis? When a crisis hits, everyone, of course, the floodgates will open and they'll say, yes, I would like to support. But when you're in a long-term activation, in our case, like a Ukraine, where we as an emergency organization, that was our core, really how we were founded was based on that. We're an emergency relief organization. We hit the ground running 24 to 72 hours. We're there. And as soon as food access comes back online, we don't want to disrupt those local economies. So we just scale our efforts back and make sure that those local communities are engaged while we are there, but also we step back after the crisis is winding down and acute food needs are no longer that acute. So it's tough when you are in these long-term conflict zones where there are still acute food needs in Ukraine, for example, in newly liberated towns and across the front lines. How do you keep that momentum with your donors going? So this is where I think storytelling is so important. This is where engaging with our robust donor base is incredibly valuable. Bringing them along on that journey and communicating often of, here is the latest headlines from Ukraine, for example. Let's stick with that thread. Our relief team has dispatched X number of meals this week alone, and then the retrospective perspective of like over the last 2+ years, we have provided over 260 million meals thanks to your support. So we lead with that gratitude, putting it in big context, but also diving down to the details and bringing them along on that journey with us as we continuously update them along the way, and inspire them to really give continuously and ongoingly, because this crisis is not over yet. So we remind them we are not over inundate them, but we are in constant conversation. So I think it's that storytelling piece of, we can't turn our backs on our Ukrainian colleagues and friends who are still in deep pain and suffering. I would point to storytelling and that ongoing dialogue and communication, placing an importance on that, bringing them along on that journey.
I love that. Abby or Courtney, you guys are both working for very long-standing organizations. How do you keep those donors engaged after you get them initially involved?
Yeah, going to that point that I mentioned earlier about kind of this shift of how donors even want to be giving, right? That's even changed. And so it's required us to have more one-on-one conversations and relationship real true stewardship. The other thing is when you raise funds through a workplace, not everybody stays in their workplace for 30 years, 40 years anymore. And so it's really even more critically important in how you engage the donor rather than just the workplace, right? And so, a few decades ago, we saw that, and we saw this trend coming of overall just workforce trends, knowing that the need for us to individually engage was so important. And so I think the important thing is how do folks want to be engaged, right? And Tunde touched on the various different varieties and being, relationships. There's a great former colleague of mine that said relationships in fundraising should be durable and multidimensional, and that's exactly what it needs to be, right? And so there's someone who wants to receive text versus someone who just give me the facts, ma'am, like give me the data, versus someone who wants to be inspired by a story, right? You have to have key and consistent call to action throughout all of those various modalities, but they have to look and feel different, knowing that how people process information, how people get excited, how they get the warm glow differs from person to person. And so, we are very mindful of that at United Way and are constantly thinking about, do we have the right places and spaces? Are we, stewarding the relationship to a point that we're not pissing people off, like making sure that every moment matters, every experience matters, and we don't take that lightly. We're very intentional as how we think about stewarding those relationships.
That's great.
I couldn't agree more. We had a training that we did for our staff at one point that compared donors to all of the castaways from Gilligan's Island, right? You had the movie star, you had the professor who wanted the data, you had the couple who wanted to just have their name up in light, the movie star who wanted to be all, and just because they all had their own way, right, based on their personality about how they would want to be engaged. And it was super cute, but like the whole point was that each one of them had a different way that they would be engaged with it as a donor. And it just kind of brought home to staff who were not professional fundraising development or volunteers. We did it for some boards too, to say like, look, see, they all are going to be donors. They all are going to engage in this, but kind of, would you bring the professor, their name, you bring them a bunch of kids to come and play with, like you would Mary Ann? You wouldn't. Like, that's not how you would do that with him, right? And so like, I think, but that's the whole point, is that the way that we're going to engage with them and what's going to get them excited and turn their light on and make their eyes shine is going to be different. And so, you need to figure that out. And, sometimes that's hard when it's by direct mail or maybe email, but that's why you have to kind of have a little bit of all of that in different places. And maybe it's, this email is going to be more data and this email is going to be more storytelling, a little bit of both and all of them. And you got to make sure that you've got a good mix so that you're catching them in some form. Every third one they're going to be like, oh, that's the one I really like, kind of a thing. And so, do you have the right balance in all of your things? Not all of it. We talk about the face with the case, right? Like you can put all the numbers in there, but you got to put a face on it too, right? Have you put that face with all the numbers that you have out there? And so just a little bit of all of that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, we are at the 2-minute mark, so no pressure on you guys, but I'm wondering if you can just quickly give us a sentence or two that you want everyone, the biggest takeaway you want everyone to walk away with today.
So I would just say, don't be scared to try. Like if you're not trying and if you're not out there doing new things, you're definitely not going to be diversifying your revenue streams, and not all of it's going to work. But you've got to be attempting to do new things, and you've got to be putting new things out in the marketplace. And I think sometimes we're so afraid to fail that we don't try new things. And so I would just say, get out there and try some new things and talk to people, ask their opinions. And, you're going to find the thing that works for you. And that's going to be really exciting when you do.
I love that. Great point.
Yeah, I definitely second that. And I would just add that while exciting, implementing new revenue generating initiatives can come with the risk of spreading teams too thin. So I'm very mindful of my team's capacity. I think World Central Kitchen, we have an embarrassment of riches with our many, many, many grassroots donors. There are so many different ways that we could be engaging them. But I also keep in mind my team's well-being and avoid burnout as I evaluate new funding streams and opportunities that come our way.
Great point. Absolutely.
Yeah, and yes to all of that. Use data, evaluate whether things are really as effective as you think they are. If they're not, dig in, pivot, make sure you have the right people with the right training. And, you know, constantly as an executive leader, as a leader in your organization, constantly be looking at what the trends are telling you, so that you're not sitting idly by.
I love that. So no fear of failure, data, and keeping in mind the well-being of your staff. I love that. That feels really holistic and a great way to kind of close out. So I just want a huge thank you to Apereo, to NYU for putting this on, for letting me moderate despite my challenges, and to all of you for just sharing your great expertise and insights. It's really been an honor. Thank you, everybody. And for everyone who showed up today, we really appreciate your time. So best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.